found this little wooden box in a shop called The Works, and it was only £2. I love this fretwork on the top, and I know that I can do something with resin for that. It's unusual because it's round and it's hinged, which is great. It's a little bit rough, so I think I'm going to paint it, but the hinges and the clasp are attached with screws, which make it so much easier to take off so that I can get the paint on there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll make sure that I put them in a safe place so that I know where they are ready to put back on again. And I've also got this piece of packaging, which you can see is holographic. It came from Temu, and I think it had some chameleon powders or something in it. So I'm hoping to use that on the inside of the fretwork to give a holographic look to my mosaic. So I've almost finished doing this, and then I'm ready to paint. I'm going to use this paint from Johnston's. It's for wood and metal, and it's a satin. The wood is a little bit rough, and I haven't sanded it yet, but I'll see how it goes after it's painted. I can always sand it again. So I'm going to paint around the edge and the top of this one, but I'm going to leave the inside plain. And as for the surface of the fretwork, there's very little paint on my brush. I'm almost dry brushing, and I'm patting it rather than brushing across the surface. I don't want to block the holes. And again, I'll do the sides and the bottom. Okay, that's had one coat and it's dry, and I think that's enough coverage for now. I need to varnish the inside. Now you can paint it, but there's no real point. I'm going to be covering it anyway, so I just need to make sure that this is nice and smooth for when I'm attaching the bezel tape. And also, if you're going to put resin in wood, if you don't seal it, it's possible that you can get some bubbles from it. I'm using some acrylic varnish in a similar way that I did the painting on the other side. I don't want to be brushing this all over the surface. I'm trying not to get a build up of the resin in the holes. I don't want those to clog up. And once this surface has been sealed, and I think probably one coat of varnish will be enough, I'll let that completely dry, and then I will be ready to attach my bezel tape. The tape I'm using is from Let's Resin. So I'm going to cut off a strip that is long enough to stretch across the diameter, a little bit longer. This tape is pliable enough that I will be able to shape it up the sides. So I'm going to place the tape across the middle, and then I'll use my fingers to press that down and my fingernail to push that along the edge so that I get this stuck over all of the holes. And I want it to be stuck down firmly. And then once I'm happy with that, I can add a piece on either side. Right, I can see that all the holes are covered, and I'm going to be using some Let's Resin, UV resin, and I've got some mica flakes. And I want to fill in all these holes in various colours, but first I just want to put down a layer of resin just to make sure that everything is sealed. So I'm going to put a drop of clear resin in these bigger pieces, and then I'll gently use my stick to spread that out. And I want to be careful, I don't want to poke a hole in the tape or push it away from the underside of the wood. Once I've got those covered, I'm going to add a few flakes of these iridescent mica flakes. I'll put those in each one. And again, I want to make sure they're laying flat. I don't want any of those protruding through the surface. And then I'll cure that. And I'll carry on going around doing exactly the same to all of these pieces. And these will be the only ones that I put the flakes in because they are the largest. So I only want a thin layer in there. I'm going to use my stick to make sure that I don't have too much. Drop in the mica flakes and make sure that they are all laying flat. And then I can cure this as well. Now I'm going to add some blue pigment from J. Diction, and I'll put the tiniest drop in the bottom of my pot. Then I can mix in my UV resin, and I'll be able to top up all of these little pieces. That's such a beautiful colour. I mixed it in and it was a little bit too dark, so I added some more UV resin and then continued to mix it. And then I just used my stick to drop this into the holes and top them up. And it was just the colour I was looking for. I added some more colours and cured it from the back as well as the front, and now I'm going to remove the bezel tape. And it comes off really easy because I did the varnishing on the back first. Okay, and I mentioned that I have this packaging which was from Temu, so I'm going to place that behind here, and I think you can see through the blue pieces at least you're going to get a really brilliant effect. You can see the holographic. So I just need to cut a circle diameter of my piece, and then I'm going to glue that onto the inside. As luck would have it, my roll of tape was just the right size, so I drew around that with a Sharpie and then I cut this out. This is such a pretty piece of packaging and it seemed a shame to throw it away, so I'm glad I'm using it in this way. Okay, let's see the fit, and you can see it through those blue pieces. It's gorgeous. The back was slightly sticky from the bezel tape, but I knew that that was not going to be enough to hold it in. And it doesn't go all the way to the edge, but it's just enough. The little purple pieces, you really can't tell that the holographic is behind it, but you definitely can for the blue. You get such a beautiful effect. I used B7000 glue and added some dots just around the areas of the wood in between all those pieces. Then I could fit my piece of plastic in and smooth it down. There are a couple of areas where I managed to get some of the colour on top of the lid, so I'm just painting in a little bit of white and patching that up, and then I'll set this aside and let it dry. The side of the box has got 2 coats of white paint on it, but it's pretty plain, so I want to put a border around it, and to do that I'm going to have to measure its circumference. So I'll get a piece of string and wrap that around and then cut that where the 2 pieces meet, and then I'll be able to measure this piece of string and know exactly how long my border, or how long the vinyl will need to be for me to cut out my border. I'm going to use some of this vinyl, but it's silver and I want to mimic the colours that are in the lid, so I'd like a blue and a kind of red or pink. So I'm going to colour this with some alcohol inks. I'm going to use a Adirondack ink in the colour Pool, and this one is by the brand SigWong and it's Scarlet. So I'm going to give them a good shake, and then I'm using a little bit of sponge to apply it. So I'll put some drops on the sponge and I'm just going to dab that onto the surface of the vinyl. I'm going to do half and half, so half this side will be blue and then I'll put the red on the other side and merge them in together, so I might end up with a bit of a purple in the middle. I'll just need to leave that to dry completely, and then I'll be able to cut out some gems using my Cricut. I'm using some low-tack painter's tape as a transfer tape because I don't want to pull off any of the alcohol ink. And I'm just sticking them onto the tape, and then I've balanced my pot on a roll of tape, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply them. Try and get them lined up so that they're roughly level, and then I can do each one individually, rubbing it down and pulling the tape off. And I'm doing the same thing and lining up the diamonds in between each one. Before I wanted to put it back together, I'm using some Let's Resin UV resin to coat the top. I added a generous amount to the surface and then used a silicone tool to spread that out to the edges. And then I used a long neck lighter just to pop any bubbles. Unfortunately, there were a few bubbles that started to come up, and that should have been a warning. I really should have cleaned this off before I went any further. But I started to use my UV lamp, and I'm holding this up quite high. There's quite a lot of resin on there. If you hold it up from a distance, then it tends not to buckle or wrinkle. Unfortunately, I did notice some bubbles starting to come up, so the wood wasn't as sealed as I thought it might be with the paint. But I let it finish curing, and there are lots of bubbles, and unfortunately there will be nothing I can do about it now. I'm not that happy, but it is a piece for me. If I was going to be doing this for somebody, then that would be a piece that would be ruined. I think it could be that the wood wasn't completely sealed, or maybe the paint hadn't dried from where I had touched it up. I have no idea. I think in hindsight I should have wiped it off as soon as I saw the bubbles starting to come up before I cured it. But we live and learn. Anyway, I've put my piece together. I'm very glad that I put the pattern around the bottom. It isn't as bad as I think it is. I'm going to leave the inside like this. I quite like seeing that under there. It's a useful little box, but there we go. Can't have a winner all the time. However, the box was cheap enough, £2, that I could go back and get another one if I wanted to try this again. Anyway, if you've liked this video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't. It's free, and you just need to tick the subscribe box underneath the video. You'll be able to come back and see what I'm going to be making next time. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.